June 4th, 2004. An Air Force veteran turned small business owner is distraught and currently trying to fight a losing legal battle with the local head family that controls Granby, Colorado with a firm grip. With no other options, he will go on to make the ultimate decision. The decision that will end up with several businesses destroyed and his competitors in shambles. This is the story of the Granby, Colorado Killdozer Rampage. The town of Granby, Colorado was a thriving town, a town with bustling business, home to the Mountain Park Concrete Center, a center that heavily wished to expand its reaches. At an auction in 1992 for a small piece of land, Cody Dochev, the leader of Mountain Park Concrete, would suddenly see his plans for expansion white when a new coming outsider outbid him for $42,000. This man later built a muffler shop inside of this land, and when Cody asked him for how much it would cost, this outsider said it was his for $60,000. This person was Marvin Heemeyer. Marvin Heemeyer would grow up in Castlewood, South Dakota. His friends would say he was a likable person, always helping those in need. However, others would disagree, saying that he was quick to anger. Regardless, Heemeyer would grow up into the U.S. Air Force. Not much is known about his service, and no one really will know for sure. But what is known is that he clearly took on a liking for welding shortly after, moving to Granby, Colorado, and after acquiring this land, he started his own business, Mountain View Mufflers. But what Heemeyer didn't know about Dochev was that the Dochevs were connections. Unbeknownst to Heemeyer, that name tied in great association with nearly every aspect of the Granby government. And after negotiation for the business's land, Marv would place it up to $375,000, then at $1 million. The Dochefs were very much displeased, and soon enough, they began to bring down the fist they had on Marv. Marvin would later be informed of an issue on his land, that his business was not properly connected to the town's sewer system. Intending to fix this issue, Marv would go to the sewer board's leader, Ron Thompson. Ron Thompson, deep friend of the Dochev family, was not too interested in helping this man, offering a deal to fix his problems for $90,000. Marvin obviously declined this offer, waiting until the November of that year when he came back for a better deal, getting one with Gus Harris to traverse his property at $20,000 per acre. But Marv would later be ghosted and his business remained unconnected. After Marvin learned of this, he would look into other methods. However, these would require the express permissions of his neighbors over at Mountain View Concrete. Meanwhile, during a search, the Dochefs were already applying for a mundane zoning law that made certain parts of property exempt from ownership. By the time Marvin would hear from this, he would already be past the deadline to answer it, and in due time, Mountain View Mufflers was surrounded by construction equipment and cut off from the public. Marvin, obviously livid about the lack of interaction and knowledge, and seeking to maintain a route to his business, would purchase a Komatsu bulldozer in an auction for $20,000. However, in this attempt to make a path, Town Hall would quickly shut him down. And in due time, without any response from Marvin, Town Hall would begin to impose fines, shutting down Mountain View mufflers until his sewage system was brought up to standard, a task he could not take up. He would be fined $100 a day. And without a form of income, Marvin began to auction off his equipment one by one. However, at the same time, Marvin would write a check for $3,351 to the Town Hall under the name of Cowards and Lies Department. This would show how Marvin was obviously mad at Town Hall, which he would later attempt to take to court, but was unsuccessful, later being fined for various issues that they saw on his property, with charges going up to $1,000. Marvin soon drove the bulldozer into his garage, and without any other options, Marvin began to create.
If I would have been married, had a family, things may have gone different. But God built me for this job. He rewarded me for 45, 50 years with the lifestyle that I am so thankful for. And it's unfortunate, the poor people in Granby, so many of them were so jealous of my lifestyle that I could come and go as I pleased. Well, God blessed me in advance for the task that I am about to undertake. It was sometime in 2001, I believe, that the peace, I wept at times trying to understand why this was happening to me. And to do what I had to do to make these people listen, to learn, was just above me. And when I realized that one day, when I was sitting in the hot tub, and I was weeping, a peace came over me that has only come over me a few times before in my life, where I knew that what I was doing was wrong, but it was the right thing, and that it was above me. It wasn't me. I was doing this because God wanted me. And I didn't understand. I said, why did you ask me to do this? Is that why I've never been married, so I didn't have a family? Is that why I've always been successful, so that I would realize my reward for doing this task? Had I not carried my cross earlier, and now God has prepared me to carry this cross? I believe so. And I'm carrying the cross still. At first, I thought. But it has to be done.
The events began on around 2:15 when Heemeyer began his rampage by driving an armored bulldozer through the Mountain Park Concrete Center. Tony Dochev, one of the main leaders of the center, attempted to stop this by bringing a wheel tractor scraper against the bulldozer, which was quickly stopped after Heemeyer began firing at it with a frontal-faced rifle. The Killdozer then made its way to the town, where it began to be met with large amounts of police response. It would start over by destroying one of the various buildings that was important to the Dochev family, the town hall. The bulldozer then began to move on to other buildings, such as the police station and the local newspaper, which had slandered his name.
7 or 11, snake eyes watching you. Double up or quit, double strike a split, the ace of spades. like it, baby, I don't wanna live forever. And don't forget the Joker.
And as the Killdozer began to move on to lesser businesses, Officer Glenn Trainer of the local police department hopped on top of the vehicle, finding that it had been welded shut.
Been confirmed.
Ma'am, let's go back to Newsweek's. Tell me. We talked about this a little bit earlier.
Pushing up the ante, I know you got to see me. Freedom and weep, the dead man's hand again.
Now, if you'll stay with us, he is just headed westbound again. This is tape. He is just again headed westbound into the downtown area. Right there, may have taken out a radiator. He doesn't stop for light poles. He doesn't stop for buildings. He takes out the...
And shortly after his radiator was damaged, Heemeyer drove into a workshop, where his vehicle turtled between the basement and the ground level. It was around this time when SWAT began surrounding the vehicle, and with no other options, Marvin Heemeyer inside his vehicle took his own life.
The police would later surround the vehicle 2 hours after the rampage began, and after several unsuccessful attempts to open the vehicle, they would have success, roughly at 2 a.m. the next day with a cutting torch, recovering Marvin's body. The rampage overall caused $7 million in damages, with no reported casualties apart from Heemeyer himself. During the rampage, the governor had requested the support of National Guard helicopters and soldiers, which was never dispatched. The Killdozer was then later brought to a scrapyard and demoed, with parts being transported to various other areas in the region. Marvin would leave behind both notes and his manifesto to all that were seen involved in his life, including the Dochefs.